Welcome to the Apex Sunday podcast, hosted by myself, Robert Ross, and John Dowsett. Today we're talking about Misano 2 and Mandalika, and also how the pressure of the championship affects things, and how sponsorship and marketing may affect the outcome of sporting events. But before we begin, how are you doing, John?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Great.
And you?
Not bad, not bad. So let's talk about the races first and then about the peripheral things that basically affect the race. So regarding Misano 2, I found that Pecco looked like he was pushing a little bit more harder in qualifying than he usually does, and he got the pole position. Mark again crashed in qualifying, and what he said was there's too much grip on the rear tire. And I always find this a little bit fascinating that coming from Formula
Hmm.
One for years, the more grip you have, the better you are. But in motorcycle racing, depending on the rider, it seems the more grip you have, sometimes it's not as good. What do you think about that
I,
dynamic?
I I was trying to parse that, and I was thinking that if you have a little bit more um, feedback from the rear wheel as to cornering limits, and in the middle of a turn, if the back end starts coming out a bit, that's quite you can handle that.
Hmm.
But if there's too much stick, then oh my god, it's like yeah, I can see how you would say that.
Right. And it seems to affect, they say that the rear affects the front. The increased grip on the rear affects how the front operates. And of course, they're all connected, and it's much smaller than a car.
Right.
Those are the kind of things. And then in the sprint, it was evidently very difficult to pass, which was a little bit different than Misano 1, but there was a lot more grip on the circuit this time. And again, I thought Pecco was very aggressive in the race. You could see his bike moving around a little bit more than
Hmm.
usual. And it took Martin going wide to pass. And Fabio Quartararo on the Yamaha, they're improving. Had an
Hmm.
outstanding ride. That was great to see. And then for the race, I've noticed that Pecco kind of fades when the tires are not to his liking. So if he does have a weakness, I would say his adaptation to fading tires isn't as good as Martin's and Mark's adaptation. But halfway through the race, it came to his liking, and then he had that fall. And these falls are so sudden that some of them are unrecoverable. um,
Yes.
you've you've ridden motorcycles. Have you ever fallen off one? Or I know it's on the
Unfor-
street, so it's different.
Unfortunately, yes.
Hmm.
um, but nothing like these guys. I mean, those lean angles are just crazy, and I can see how it's just gonna snap at the edge. But they've got soft rubber, all the way up the sidewall. So I never had that.
And very hot rubber too, right? In a
Yeah,
race,
sticky rubber. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And so, and then Enea was all over Martin. Eventually, he passed him, and again, Fabio was outstanding, and the Honda riders were happier as
Hmm.
well. Mir was punted back to the back at the beginning, but he recovered to 11th, and Marini finished 12th. So some signs of progress, particularly from Yamaha. Rins is relatively still injured, and he was sick, so he didn't participate. So they
Right.
only had Fabio. But again, I think Fabio is, to me, second to Mark in his ability. And as soon as the bike gets a little bit better, he shows up and, and does a great job.
Hmm.
So that was nice to see. Anything about the race that struck you other than these kind of things?
Uh, I kind of question whether there was some tire management going on.
Hmm.
Um, I'm sure that there was, but
Right.
it was a fun race to watch. Not a lot of passing, but it was a good race.
No.
I still enjoyed it.
Yeah. So for the rider of this event, I'm going to give it to Jorge Martin. He didn't win, but he collected a lot of points. And the way he handled himself post race was quite good, and that's basically on the Enea Martin pass. Somewhat controversial. I didn't really think it was that bad. What did you think of the pass? Because sure,
Uh, there are two sides, right? You can look at it and say that was really nasty what he did. That was really
mm,
nasty what he did. You can also look at it and say this is the pinnacle of motorcycles, and if you aren't going for it, then why are you racing? So they're
mhm,
both sides. I think that the winner, I agree with you wholeheartedly, because to come off the track like that and not have fisticuffs is incredible.
yes, yeah.
Because
There's a lot of
back in the days
class.
there would be, right?
Hmm.
Like Rossi would
Yeah,
have been
yeah.
throwing fists.
And I think what it shows is I've heard other people comment about it. Is like you shouldn't make enemies of the people you compete against because
No,
they'll race you
no,
even harder.
not smart. No,
Hmm.
they can
And
make your life miserable.
diplomacy is a sign of maturity, I think, even if you disagreed with the move and so forth, and they both voiced their disagreements, but they didn't escalate it into a whole bunch of drama. And I thought Martin was just spectacular in that regard.
It also gives him the position to return the favor, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I will say, so similarly down the field, the same kind of thing happened with between Zarco and Miller, but we didn't see it, and Miller
Hmm.
had no problem with it. But everyone is mentioning, and I heard this a lot last season, is that the nature of the bikes now means that you have to make these kind of passes, or at least more frequently than you used to. So there's that factor. And then I thought back to, I remember Marquez a few years ago in Australia passing Cal Crutchlow at Lukey Heights, and he went on the inside and banged him up a little bit off the track, and Crutchlow waved his head in disapproval. But after the race, they were just fine with each other. It was just a hard move, and then it reminded me of Crutchlow did the same thing to Mark years ago in Silverstone. So there seems to be a line here that is very flexible about the reactions to these kind of these kind of things. And then in precedent, Rossi Gibbernow in Jerez 1995, Rossi banged into Gibbernow, pushed him right off the circuit and won the race, and no penalties and so forth. Marquez did that to Lorenzo at Jerez in his rookie season. He took second place for that. Pecco said that Martin did the same to him last year at Qatar and India. And I remember Martin taking out Enea in a very similar incident in the past as well. So it just seems lots of people want this kind of drama, and I really don't care about that kind of stuff. Yeah.
It's the ugly
The other,
part of the sport, as far as I'm concerned.
mm,
He knew exactly what was going to happen, and
yeah,
it is dirty, dirty riding. It is dirty riding,
mm.
and yeah, but you're not going to get away from it. The stakes are too high.
And the other factor is some people were saying they were okay with the move, but Enea went off circuit afterwards. But if you look closely, he sort of went off circuit by looking back at Martin to make sure he was still up or if he had crashed. And it was on the blue. And apparently, if you're on the blue, that means that you've lost time and they don't penalize you. And I remember Binder getting 3 second penalties by just touching the green at the very last lap, a couple of races, and he lost the podium. So it goes back to I just have no idea what to think anymore about these rules and how they're enforced and how they're interpreted. It's There's no clear answers anymore, and I just sort of put up my hands. I just don't know what to think about these kind of things.
Well,
Uh,
I was waiting for a penalty to land. I think most people were,
mhm.
but it's water under the bridge. It's done.
Right, right.
Yeah,
All right. So getting back to the rider again of Martine, and I'm going to give the race or the event, the sprint and the race a 6. What about yourself?
I'm starting to get boring, but I have to agree with the rider of the day, and I really like that track, and so I'm going to give it an 8 because I love
Okay.
that race, even though there wasn't any passing. There was very little passing, and the
Yeah.
passing there was ugly. But yeah.
Right. So
Hmm.
moving on to Mandalika, I guess the story in qualifying is Mark fell twice and failed to go
Hmm.
beyond 12th place. And that leads to the sprint where Mark passed 7 riders in the first corner and eventually finds his way up into third place. So once again, like Pecco did in the race at Mandalika, even falling back, they find a way to score a podium and a significant amount of points. Martin going off in the sprint kept the clutch in, didn't stall the bike, got on as fast as possible, but was just out of reach of even scoring a single point. And so we had I thought it was a pretty good sprint. What did you think of the sprint in Mandalika?
It was eventful, and it was
Yes.
eventful and shocking. Um, I, I don't know how Martin did that. They didn't. I didn't see a lot of great footage of it to really show what went down, other than maybe his tires weren't up to temperature or something, and he just expected more out of the bike.
Hmm.
But watching Marquez, Mark Marquez was unbelievable.
Yeah, and I will say that Mandalika, there was a normal amount of a lot of crashes in this race, wasn't there? I
Yeah.
mean, everyone was crashing. So I'm not used to that coming from Formula One, where you see a crash occasionally, but
Hmm.
just so many crashes. And then we had the race with Martin dominated. We had a great battle between Mark and Digia. That was the highlight for me. They were passing each other constantly until Digia lost it. And yeah, I got pretty close um, to doing well. And then he crashed out as well.
Hmm.
And again, Pecco got some good points. And the other highlight was Acosta. Uh, he finished well in the sprint, and he finished well in the race and
Great ride.
showing his potential again.
Hmm.
Amongst the Ducatis, and particularly the Ducati 2024s, which are just, as you said before, seem to be another class. So it's
Hmm.
almost like multi-class racing. So for the event, for Mandalika, I'm going to give it a 7, and I give the rider to Acosta. What about yourself?
I'm going to say that wins the crown for the most improved this year from the start of the season. The constant
Hmm.
move up, which is golden. But have to give it to Mark. I,
Right.
I, if you've ever raced an inferior car, it is
Hmm.
gut wrenching, and it's very difficult to go out there and give it your all. And he didn't have
Yeah.
a race winning bike, but he never gave up and
Hmm.
did some really ballsy things. So I have to give it to Mark Marquez, and
It's rare to
I'll give
see
it an 8.
a okay. It's rare to see a technical failure too, with Mark's engine going during the race. You
Hmm.
don't see that too often. But so getting back to the crash, and sort of like there was news that Jack Miller is going to be with uh, Pramac on the Yamaha. So they've got these riders that have a lot of experience as they continue to develop the Yamaha. But people are saying, well, Jack hasn't been doing too well recently. Jack himself said he didn't want to be in the sport because of his passport. We've got Samkat Chantra coming from Moto 2 into um, Honda with the Idemitsu brand. So they sponsor riders, Asian riders, and try to get them into the sport. And my question is the line between sponsorship and promoting the sport, and you need a rider from your country to do well in the country. Obviously, here in Canada, where you don't have any riders that'll be in MotoGP, so that doesn't really matter to us. But like if we look at F1 with the Logan Sargent experiment, and that what's the new guy Calapinto
Hmm.
replaces him and just outdoes him immediately.
Instantly, yeah.
Um, where's the line? Like, get I guess the behind it all is to market effectively to build the sport in different countries. You need an American rider, an Australian rider, a Japanese, a Thai rider, all these kind of things. Um, I don't know if living in Canada helps us with this, but I've never really cared. I mean, it's nice to have Canadians in F1 or elsewhere, but it's not something that gets me into the sport. And sometimes riders and drivers are in the sport and they don't really deserve to be in it, and it is because of their passport and trying to promote a certain rider from certain countries. So, and you raced club racing and you had sponsorship as well. What did they want from you as a sponsor
I, I
when you were
I'm going
racing?
I'm going to suggest that you might be going entirely down the wrong path.
Okay.
And I can really only base this on Formula One because I followed it
Hmm.
for so long, and I followed it through the era, to really date myself, before sponsorship really mattered. So that
Yeah.
really dates me.
Yeah.
Um, and it's only in the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years, maybe even a little
Hmm.
bit longer than 10 years, that we've seen this um, bizarre thing happen with people like, and I'm going to get shot by saying this, but people like Perez, um, uh, people like Sargent, um,
Yeah.
but maybe the biggest thing would be Mazepin, and
Hmm.
all it is money. So does Perez bring money to the team? Oh my God! And so where does the money come from? The money comes from Mexico. If
Yeah.
they can't put Perez up on billboards and in Mexican magazines, why am I
Hmm.
going to give them any money?
Hmm.
This is and this is what I believe. It's just about the mighty currency and of
Hmm.
what a driver bank brings, because off track, um, it's my job now to entertain my sponsors' clients,
Yeah.
to go on marketing junkets, to go on photo shoots so I can be on posters, so I can
Right.
be in magazines. And we don't see it in Canada, but you
Yeah.
sure see it in Europe. And I'm sure that you see it in South America and in Europe when it comes to MotoGP, and
Hmm.
as well as Formula One. You can't drive around without seeing billboards, without Formula One drivers on them. And I'm sure it's the same with
Yeah.
MotoGP drivers. So
Yeah.
I think it's just money. I think it's just money. And Mazepin stayed for how long? He should have stayed for 2 or 3 races. Did he
Yeah.
stay for more than a season? Yeah, and for
Yeah.
those of you who don't follow for Formula One, Mazepin was a Russian guy who rarely finished a race, would always
Hmm.
qualify last, and was an absolute rolling chicane and a threat on the track, a threat on the
Yeah.
track. But he stayed because he kept his team going by daddy funding the entire team, because he had,
Yeah.
had the largest um, fertilizer business in Russia. Anyway,
And
he's
this
long gone,
goes this,
thankfully.
and this goes back to sort of the beginning of racing was a bunch of rich people because they were the only ones who could afford it, right? And when you were
Strange,
club
huh?
racing, you mentioned you were in mixed class racing, and
Hmm.
so the top classes, and maybe I don't know, was there a mixture? Like, what was the quality of the drivers there? Were there some that were really good and some that didn't belong there, or what was the story?
Of course, there were some that didn't belong there, but very few.
Mm,
And everybody who was doing it was phenomenally passionate about it. Phenomenally passionate about it. And
right.
and it was kind of interesting because me in the lower class, and I was in the bottom class in
Yeah.
GT racing. Um, I couldn't have done it without sponsorship. It cost a lot of money. And meanwhile, the
Yeah.
guys that are in the top classes, like GT1, half of them had mean sponsorship. No, maybe
Mm,
3/4 of them had huge sponsorship. Half of those, it was their own companies. So these are like
right.
uber wealthy people that could afford
Yeah.
to. to put their name, their company on their car and go racing and write it off. And I'm making so
Right.
much money. They were making so much money that the write off was great for them. But anyway, yeah, and there were very very few people that were weapons on the track, but there is always a weapon on the track.
Yeah. And wasn't one of your funnest things to do for sponsors was to put executives in your car and scare them as you drove
Absolutely,
them around?
absolutely, absolutely. Yes, yes. We'd
um,
get by the track for lunch and take my clients, take their clients out around
yeah.
Grand Prix tracks. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did anyone scream?
One person threw up. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
and it was a guy who said, "Can you take my girlfriend?" And then he walked around to the driver's side and he whispered to me, "Make her puke." And I feel really badly, but I did. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. I feel badly about that. Yeah.
So the other thing is like the pressure, like how much under pressure were you from your sponsors, and how much pressure do you think there was? Or like you said, it's just maybe not too much as long as you show up and race at the highest level, like Perez. We can use your image and say you're a Formula One driver and
Oh, I don't know
you
about
you
that.
use these products.
I don't know about
No?
that. I think that there's um, uh, the amount of dollars that are spent defines how much you're beholden to them. There's one thing that I ruined it for somebody on the weekend. We were watching a Formula One race, and they were
Mm.
interviewing the drivers after the race. And I paused it for a moment, and I said, "I want you to watch something. There will be minimally seven times. There'll be
Yeah.
minimally seven times that Lando Norris touches his face with
Right.
his left hand." And he said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, it's in the sponsorship deal. He's wearing a watch, and he has to put the watch on
Yeah.
television minimally seven times when he's interviewed." And sure enough, he's up there and he's going like this. Then he's touching his ear and he's rubbing his forehead and he's going like this
Yeah.
on his face, but he's making sure that those seven times he's got that watch up on the screen. And what does
Right.
he get? He probably gets $100,000 worth of watches for free, and they probably give
Yeah.
the team a couple $1,000,000 or something.
Yeah. I notice on the podium for MotoGP, they always have to hold up the Red Bull can or whatever energy drink can, as long
Right?
with certain sunglasses and all
Yes.
these things. It's
Yes.
all for the sponsors.
Absolutely.
So the other part of that is the stewarding and how much sponsorship and marketing the sport affects stewarding. And obviously, the big example in F1 was Hamilton in 2021 with Max in Abu Dhabi. Um, and then we had this like at the post Mandalika, we had three riders possibly getting a tire pressure penalty because they were under pressure, right? So
Hmm.
unfortunately, that didn't happen except for Nakagami, but he only went back one spot anyways because barely anyone finished this race because of all the crashes. Um, but it does seem to me that certain when the championship's on the line and there's certain riders or drivers involved, the rules get a little bit more flexible. What do you think? And I think that's because of, you know,
That's a
it's
really
about the
tough one.
image. It is a
That's a
tough one.
really tough
Yeah.
one because, but it's true, isn't it? And there's
Mhm.
that soft area of when um, there's a battle for the lead and something is slightly off and they let it slide for
Yeah.
one rider, but not another rider.
Mhm.
Does that happen? I don't know if it happens or if it's just a fluke and we imagine that it's happening because
Mm.
these are supposed to be incredibly impartial people, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I don't really know. I fear that that would ever happen. And if we go to again, we're leaving MotoGP to talk about the Hamilton um, having his Formula One championship stolen by Max Verstappen, which was very clear. Nobody will disagree with that. I think it was just a bonehead maneuver, somebody getting all wound up, not knowing what to do, and did the wrong
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's what it is.
Mhm. Yeah, it just it
It does reek
the
of
way
that,
they
doesn't it?
yeah, and the way they enforce the penalties and the inconsistency breeds these kind of thoughts in everyone. Like, oh, is it legitimate or what's happening here? Why did this if it happened downfield with Zarco and Miller, there was almost no one talking about that other than, oh, it did happen down the field with Zarco and Miller. So uh I we don't want the rules to be bent just to give the victories to one or other rider or driver and
Right.
that kind of thing.
We don't want them, so it's
Um,
going to determine the race outcome.
yeah,
That's basically
exactly.
what it is, right?
Hmm.
I mean,
So
in a simple way, if you've got a 15-second lead or a 10-second lead, and you cross the line on a
yeah,
corner on the final lap, and you get penalized and end up coming in second, that's just wrong in
hmm
my mind, because
yeah,
now that's just silliness. But it is the
yeah,
rule, so maybe it should
yeah.
be that way.
Well, I think sort of the absolutism of certain decisions like that, like Binder. I remember he just touched the green and he actually lost time because his bike wobbled and he lost a position because of that. And I thought, well,
Unbelievable.
like, okay, yeah, that's the rule. But and then when you open up discretion, then that brings more arguments because people interpret things a different way. And so this also leads to this whole tire pressure rule, and no one likes it in MotoGP. The possibility of changing the
No one.
results.
Yes.
So in the case of Nakagami, he was so far back that he had no one in front of him to warm his tire more, and that's why he was under pressure. So the ludicrous thing he could have done was slow down so much, let another rider pass him, and then follow him to get the
Right.
pressure back up. And that's absurd.
Yes.
And the other thing is, Michelin tested a new tire initially for next season, a new front that didn't wasn't subject to these kind of changes with the tire pressure. So that would make it go away. But now they've delayed it after 2025 to 2026. And the reason is we don't have enough testing time for it. And I'm thinking, well, then why doesn't the governing body of MotoGP say, you know, use use 1 year old bikes or something? Let's test this through the roof so we can improve the show for next season.
Or maybe they should
It's
just pause that rule. Or maybe
or
they should
that
just
too,
get rid
yeah.
of it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just odd to me, but that's the way things are going at the moment.
But I,
And
I, I don't understand why this rule remains when the teams, the riders, and possibly even tire manufacturers saying this is silly.
yeah, it's because you have to predict where you're going to be in the race and how much heat you're going to get in your tire if you're following someone or not. Like if you think you're going to be at the front, you're going to have
Right.
increased pressure.
Right.
It's just basing your decisions on gambling. And certainly you can gamble on strategy and these kind of things, but this is just too far for me. So everyone
My
hates
question
it,
is
and
my
Mhm,
question is the ultimate aggressive riders.
mhm,
How do they keep their pressures from going off the map? Because they're definitely cooking their rubber on a regular
mhm.
basis. Is it on the? And then you can't give it on the last few laps because you want your tires to cool down. Because it takes 3 or 4 laps for your tires to come down a significant amount.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah, and it's
know.
interesting. I noticed this more in MotoGP that you mentioned a few weeks ago, like the gaps tend to fluctuate a lot more than they do in F1,
Mm-hmm.
where a guy's fairly far back and then like, Enea just starts blasting through the field. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so tire management and when they get into the right temperature and the right window and all that seems to be a massive factor.
Hmm.
And then adding this sort of tire pressure rule just makes it kind of ridiculous. So,
It's got to be a pretty
anyways,
incredible compound that they have. It's got to be an incredible compound. There's this
mhm,
fine line, and when a tire, and I've driven different race tires that do different things when they overheat, and some of them just you fall off a wall, and you're just gonna go off. You're gonna go off the track if you try and
yeah,
get near your regular pace. And there are other
right,
ones that give you a little bit of a margin, a little bit of a window where they're actually, when they're overheating, you can feel that you're losing a little bit of time, and it's time to, you know, not break as late and let
yeah.
them cool down. Um,
Mhm.
and I imagine that the rubber that they're using is a lot better. In the past, did they have more problems with tire management than this year?
Uh, and, I'm not sure. When I got into MotoGP, I noticed one of the first things I noticed was I call it old style racing in the tire management, where the tires, of course, are a factor in every discipline of racing, including F1. But in MotoGP and other motorcycle racing, other than endurance, they don't change the tires. So they have
Right.
to, it's a different way of approaching the tires throughout the entire race. So I think with the aerodynamics and the speed that they're doing now, it's just the tires are at the very limit more so than they ever have been. And the manufacturer, like they said, that we can't test this enough to make this for next season. It seems to be that, again, almost everyone's saying they can't wait for 2027 with reduced engine, reduced aero. And I think tire management will be a bit more obvious then, because it's clear to me that these guys this season are pretty close to the limit almost all the time, and that's why
Hmm.
we're seeing so many crashes and so many wobbles. Like uh, Bezecchi almost hit
Wow.
um,
Leg up in the air.
Pecco. Yeah, he almost
Yeah.
hit Pecco, and all, so they're very much at the limit. We saw Miller wipe out at the beginning of the Mandalika race and take four riders out. None of the riders are mad about it. They just said it just happens, and it's just there's no rest anymore, and it's some people, well, you shouldn't be resting when you're racing. I don't mean resting like sleeping or anything, but
Right.
taking a an approach to the entire race, like seeing the vision of the entire race and getting to the podium. And that's why riders like Pecco, Mark, Martin, they stand out to me because they do have more of a vision than some of the other riders, it seems to me. So Mark in particular, but we'll see how it goes. 2027 is there's two more seasons of these rules, so it's a far away for me, I think. And in F1, is it
Hmm.
2026 they have a new rule set?
I believe so. Yes.
So,
Yes. It was
anyways, I
delayed a
still
year because
enjoying
of
it and so
COVID.
forth. Sorry.
Oh, me too. Me too. And the highlight for me is I do think it's the pinnacle of motorsport now. I truly believe that. There's no pit stop
Mhm.
to get in the way,
Mhm.
and why they can't get rid of pit stops is beyond me in motor racing, because
Yeah.
they can. And and now we're witnessing racing where there isn't a team of people sitting in a paddock that are having a serious effect on the outcome of the race. Um,
Yeah.
and it's not, these guys are out there and give it their all, and you know exactly where everybody is. You don't have
Mhm.
somebody coming in for a pit and you're wondering, now he's in 16th place, but really he's leading the race.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really like that they don't have two-way communication, telling them things and so forth. I like that it's
Well,
up
they
to the
do.
rider.
They do. They have it in the same way that they had it in the 1960s in Grand Prix
Yeah, a
racing,
pit
which is
board.
a board,
Yeah.
right? So how
Yeah.
do you read that
Yeah.
bloody thing when you're going 230 or 300
There's must
kilometers an
a lot
hour?
of vibrations too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I guess the last thing is, I don't know if you noticed that there wasn't the crowd at Mandalika wasn't too big, but the reception outside was massive. They loved They love MotoGP there, but the tickets are a third of the average weekly wage of a person living there. So again, back to this promotion and marketing, it's not really for the people there; it's for other reasons.
Yes.
And that goes back to all these street circuits in F1. And I even heard an IndyCar podcast where they're sick of all these street circuits. They're saying there's a perfectly good circuit down the road. And it seems to be, like you said, just there's money to be made in different ways. And that's what's getting these kind of circuits in the
There's
sport.
so there's so many beautiful circuits that are just unused in professional motorsport now.
Hmm.
It's criminal. It's criminal. There's so many beautiful, beautiful tracks all over the world and
Yeah.
some of them have just gone to weeds. And
Yeah.
it's tragic. In
Hmm.
developed countries like where we live, there aren't enough tracks, and they're building more, and they're getting used
Hmm.
amazingly, but not in high end professional racing. There's still professional racing happening at, for instance, Mosport, which used to
Yeah.
host the Canadian Grand Prix. Um, Shannonville doesn't hold any really, except for some bike racing and not serious bike. I shouldn't say not serious bike racing. They have super bikes there. Um,
Hmm.
um, but Tremblant, Mont Tremblant, I'm not going to get into it. There are many, many, many,
Yeah.
many tracks in our little country that are wonderful.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, Japan is next, and really looking forward to that because it's supposed to rain all 3 days. So that throws another wrench into it. And we'll talk to you then, John. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.